My name is Robert John Langdon and you're watching my video channel. This videocast is one of my 10-minute shorts which looks at sites around Britain using LiDAR. In a strange sense, this is my version of landscape archaeology for the 21st century. I hope you enjoy it. Today we look at Durrington Walls, which is northeast of Stonehenge on the River Avon. If we look at the site from top down, it looks like a traditional round site which archaeologists call a henge. But it's not. A henge is an earthwork that is created by ditches being cut to produce a corresponding bank. The classic case is Harbour, with its massive 12-metre deep ditches and consequently 12-metre banks. But looking at Durrington Walls from the centre, it looks like it's got a bank, but no visible ditch. Archaeologists suggest that the ditch is under the surface and not visible, although the banks look massive, and one would wonder if you have dug a hole that produces that amount of soil, some kind of indentation should be visible, but it's not. The mystery deepens when you look at Durrington with LiDAR, which turns it into a 3D model. Suddenly, this changes its perspective, and the round site now turns into a round hole in the ground with steep walls just like a quarry. If we look very closely at the outside or back end of the bank looking towards the centre, we find there is no substantial bank, or it's so small it's not even worth considering as a real bank, as the land surrounding the site is at the same level. So why have the archaeologists missed this obvious design flaw and called Durrington Walls a henge? If we look at some of their diagrams of the site, we find that not only are the ditches hidden from view, but also it seems the banks, which have been marked on the site maps, but are invisible from view. So, are the archaeologists relying on detailed excavation evidence then of these ditches and banks? Well, no. All they have is geophysics guesstimations and very limited small excavation results which show that there may be ditches and banks under the ground of unknown proportions. Back to our LiDAR map, we can see that this massive carved hole in the landscape is at a strange angle. In fact, it tilts towards the River Avon and would have flooded in the past at the start of the Mesolithic when the River Avon was at its highest. Moreover, if we use LiDAR, we can see this strange earthwork is duplicated towards the River Avon. This kind of steep walls have been cut from the waters of the river. This is where LiDAR is an exceptional tool for landscape archaeology, and has not been fully utilised to its full potential when investigating Durrington Walls. Examining the river cut cliff face, we notice the extreme height the river had to be in the past to remove the chalk bedrock. This is another clear indication and proof of the post-glacial flooding that existed after the last ice age and during the Mesolithic period, obviously eroding these cliffs for thousands of years because of the raised River Avon level. If we now raise the level of the River Avon, we see that this feature floods into a perfect harbour, which would suggest it's natural to start and was tinkered with at a later date as the river levels dropped. Archaeologists have found natural springs within the site which would suggest that it would have flooded with up to 2,800 litres of water per second per spring directly at the start of the Mesolithic, gradually decreasing in flow in the following millenniums. This would explain the shallow ditch found by archaeologists, which may have been built to allow boats from the river to be beached on the shorelines at low tide. And yes, the Avon is tidal, and even more so in the past as water levels were higher, and so the current 2 metre variation would have been even greater. Before I continue, I feel I must point out that the current archaeologists believe that Durrington was a settlement for the builders of Stonehenge, as they have found post holes in round patterns on the site. But just looking at the profile of the site clearly shows that to build houses at ground level on this site would be complete bonkers. The gradient of the site would flood any house every time it rained. And why build a house in a ditch when surrounding this site is normal flat ground? The holes they found were another kind of building we see in other parts of Britain, a crannog. Crannogs are houses built in the air on stilts in flooded areas, as they are perfect mooring sites for boats. This reuse of this site is further found towards the eastern side towards the river, where we find mooring posts, similar to what we have seen on the Stonehenge Avenue, placed there in the Neolithic period as the water levels fell, with the addition of larger crannogs, which archaeologists have misidentified as small wooden ceremonial circles. Other additions to the site can be found on the western side of the Henge, with another feature that has foxed archaeologists and has been misidentified as a lynchant, which is a farming feature. This earthwork is in fact a dyke, and is also known as a linear earthwork. It's a ditch and a bank, and LiDAR clearly shows that it starts from the River Avon. Sadly again, archaeologists are unaware of why these dykes were built in the past, which is strange as there is over 1,500 plus known scheduled monuments listed as linear earthworks, and therefore are the most frequent prehistoric feature in the landscape. My other site investigations have found that dykes are late Mesolithic and early Neolithic, about 5000 BCE, and would have been added to the site as an access point once the River Avon had dropped below the natural harbour entrance, to allow boats to access the site up to the ditches we saw earlier. This is when the eastern banks and ditch must have been added to the site, which are clearly shown as very different to the other features of the site in size and shape. Again, it may be another attempt to prolong the site's usefulness by adding additional landing points for boats as the river shrunk in size. The big question for me is, what was this site used for? In the next video, we will look at the famous site connected with Durrington Walls, Henge, and why it was constructed, and the reason it reinforces the hypothesis that it was a harbour for boats. But where were these people going? A tantalising clue may be found if we go back to the dyke that crosses the site. If we look closely at LiDAR, we find it actually goes beyond the edge of the site and connects to an existing road at a very odd angle. In fact, the road is a dead end, and so there is no reason to kink like it does. We have found that some B roads were initially formed from the banks of dykes, and so logically this road could be the direction of the dyke's bank, and that takes us to the middle of the army camp, which may have been something once upon a time, but not anymore. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Tune in next week for another edition of Langdon Investigates, where we look at another ancient site. Until then, subscribe below to make sure you're informed when new videos come on the video channel. Until then, thank you for watching.